Are you here to hurt our mother too? The dying alien girl asked the human. The cafeteria at Outpost Marrow 7 never really rested. Fans in the ceiling droned in slightly different pitches, out of sync just enough to grate on nerves. Trays scraped across metal tabletops. Cutlery clicked against ration plates. Conversations overlapped in flat, tired tones as workers in gray and blue uniforms shuffled through the queue, boots leaving thin streaks of salt where dried ocean spray had settled on the floor. Light strips in the ceiling threw a harsh white glow over everything, erasing shadows, washing faces into the same pale shade. Only company badges and rank stripes broke the monotony. Yellow for infrastructure, blue for administration, red for security. The inner hall was crowded. Tables sat in neat rows, everyone occupied. Steam rose from bowls of grain stew. The smell of reheated protein, old oil, and burnt seed coffee hung in the air. Beyond a transparent wall, a secondary eating strip clung to the outer bulkhead. There, the light was colder. A subtle draft flowed from the recycling vents, carrying the sour smell of filtered waste gas and disinfectant. Narrow tables sat directly under the bulkhead plates, close enough to the vents that the constant low hum vibrated through the bench legs. A new sign had been bolted over that area. The metal still held its factory sheen. Outer seating, non-citizen species. For safety and sanitation. People pretended not to see it. Eyes passed over it in a practiced way, sliding towards safer targets. The food line, the floor, a friend's shoulder. At the last table near the end of the outer strip sat a woman and a girl. The woman's skin was a muted leaf green, the kind that should have looked soft and alive. It had gone dull. Yellow-gray shadows clung under her eyes. Her cheeks were hollowed in, making the bones more pronounced. She wore a shawl that had once been white, now stained with splotches of gray and pale rust, edges frayed and thin. Underneath, a short dress sewn from mismatched cloth ended mid-thigh. The hem uneven where somebody had cut and re-stitched it by hand. The fabric clung to her hips when the wind pushed through the vents. Her hair was thick and white, reaching down past her shoulder blades. She had tied it back with a strip of torn fabric, but loose strands had escaped and stuck to her forehead in the damp air. Her name was Arin. She had spent the last 3 years on Marrow 7. Before that, she had lived in a waterline camp on a different world where the river was the only safe thing. That river had never made her sick. The pipes here had. She kept both hands on her tray to stop them from shaking. The motion did not fully stop. The bowl on her tray rattled, thin varan root soup sloshing against metal. Next to her, the girl tried to sit like an adult. She sat straight, shoulders tense, feet not quite reaching the deck. Her skin was the same green as Arin's, but brighter. Her hair was white and long too, braided clumsily down her back with a few bits sticking out. She wore a dress cut from old curtain fabric, the pattern faded. The neckline hung slightly off one shoulder, revealing a narrow collarbone and the delicate line of her neck. Someone had embroidered a rough spiral near the hem with red thread. The girl's name was Shiva. She had just turned 6 the last cycle. Her father was not on Marrow 7. She knew not to ask where he was when her mother's jaw stiffened. Shiva stared at the soup in front of her, then at her mother's bowl, then back at her own. Her stomach cramped. She kept her face still. Arin raised her spoon. Her hand started to tremble halfway. The spoon clinked against the side of the bowl, dipped into the watery soup, then fell back in. The motion sent a thin ripple across the surface. 2 slivers of floating fat rocked at the edge. Pain hit hard on her right side. Arin pressed her free hand under the shawl, fingers digging just above her hip where the swelling felt worst. Her breath hitched once. She kept her mouth shut until the wave passed. Fear pressed against her ribs. If she showed it, Shiva would see. Shiva saw anyway. The girl's shoulders drew tighter. "Ma," Shiva said quietly, "you have to eat. If you get faint again, I cannot carry you. You are bigger than me." Her voice carried the clipped rhythm of Seraphin's speech, softened by months of hearing human workers talk around her. Arin forced her hand away from her side and reached again for the spoon. "You first," she said. "You need it more. I'm already grown." You still have work to do. I'm not growing today, Shiva muttered. It feels like my bones are sleeping. Then wake them with food, Aaron answered. There was no joke in her tone. Fatigue sat behind her words like a weight. Shiva lifted a spoonful of soup. The liquid was thin, with soft white slices of varan root drifting like tired slugs, edges frayed from overcooking. She held it near her mouth and breathed in the faint sour scent. Her tongue felt heavy. If she swallowed too fast, it would be over too soon. If she ate too slowly, her mother would push the bowl away again. She put the spoon in her mouth and pressed the root against the roof of her mouth until it turned to paste. She chewed anyway, 40 small movements, as if numbers could trick her empty stomach. Does it taste better if I chew more? She asked, trying to pull a smile over the tightness in her chest. Aaron watched her carefully. Maybe your mind will believe that, she said. Your body will not. The girl swallowed. Her throat burned for a second from the heat, then cooled with a flat, bland aftertaste. A mechanical voice cut through the inner hall. Next, inside, the line moved forward. Felix Hale stepped through the main doors with a late shift group. The doors hissed shut behind him, cutting off the corridor's hollow echo and dropping him into the thick sound of the cafeteria. He blinked once, eyes adjusting to the bright strips after hours in narrow service tunnels. He had spent the morning crouched in crawl spaces above the outer medical wing, tracking down a repeating surge that kept tripping half the dialysis bay. His shoulders ached from bracing himself between support beams. Dry dust from the ducts still scratched in his throat. Work had brought him to Marrow 7. The central office on Aurelis had flagged the outpost after a cluster of power faults in critical sectors. The cheapest option was to send one inspector for a quarter to audit the grid, write up risk reports, and sign off that everything would hold another year. Felix was that inspector. He had been moving from outpost to outpost for 7 years. He checked load charts, listened to generators, and crawled through forgotten spaces while other people discussed policy and budgets. His mission here was simple on paper. Map the stress points, recommend repairs that cost less than replacing anything big, and not cause trouble. He wanted a hot meal, a seat, and 10 minutes where nobody asked him for a status update. Standard worker, he said as he reached the front of the line. Grain block, Rex cut, side of root mash. Larn berries if you have them. Ferlin coffee, full strength. The server, a tired woman in her 40s, punched in his order without looking up. The food slid onto his tray in practiced motions. A rectangular lump of compressed grain with a crust that was more formality than texture. A slice of grilled Rex meat with grill marks darker than the rest. A small mound of root mash with a faint gloss from reconstituted fat. A small metal cup with Larn berries in pale syrup clinked onto the corner of the tray. She grabbed a mug, filled it from the coffee valve. Steam rose, carrying the bitter, roasted smell of Ferlin's seeds, slightly burnt. Inner or outer? She asked. Felix's gaze had already drifted across the hall, tracing exits, overhead supports, vent pipes. Habit. He scanned ceilings wherever he went. People below did not see the ceiling until something fell from it. The transparent partition caught his eye the way it always did. So did the sign above it. Outer seating, non-citizen species. He had seen similar signs on other stations, though not always so blunt. Most hid the intent behind softer words. Zoned seating, species-appropriate environment. He let his eyes move past at the first second, the old training kicking in. Keep your head down. Focus on the job. He could almost hear his supervisor's voice from years back, telling him that if he wanted to keep being deployed instead of sitting behind a desk, he needed to stop picking fights that were not on his task list. He had not liked that man. He had followed the advice anyway more often than he wanted to admit. His gaze slid back. 2 figures under the sign. Green skin, white hair, thin clothes in a place where company workers wore insulated fabric and layered shirts. The girl's feet hanging above the deck. Felix felt irritation push through his fatigue. His shoulders tightened under his harness. Inner or outer? The server repeated, impatient now. He looked at the open seats in the inner hall. There were a few scattered between groups. He could sit alone, eat, and finish his day the way the company expected. No record, no incident. He thought about the outer medical wing, about the old dialysis units out there that kept flickering off every time the voltage dipped. He remembered the worn Seraphin man he had seen that morning, sitting beside a machine with tubing in his arm, eyes closed, lips moving in some quiet count, as if he could make the machine last longer by counting the beats. He thought about how the repair order for replacing those units had been in the system for 2 years. "Outer," he said. The server looked up, frowning as if she had misheard. "You're human," she said. Felix kept his voice calm. "Good thing I read the sign before I forgot that," he said. "Outer." A couple of workers behind him went quiet. One shifted his tray and muttered under his breath. Another snorted a short laugh that did not reach his eyes. The server pressed her mouth into a thin line. She turned, pushed his tray into the small decontamination slot that led to the outer strip, and hit the activation pad harder than necessary. A pale blue light swept over the tray for 2 seconds. The light turned green. "Your liability," she said. "Company's liability," he corrected. "They pay my insurance." The inner access to the outer area opened with a hiss. Colder air rolled in, thin and sharp, carrying the smell of scrub fluid and salt. Felix stepped through. The noise of the inner hall dulled immediately, as if someone had thrown a switch. Out here the sound was cleaner. The low, continuous hum of the recycling vents. The distant thud of waves crashing against the support struts far below. A faint rattling where wind pushed against a loose panel. He felt the draft cut through his uniform. Goosebumps pricked along his forearms. The woman and the girl both looked up when they heard his footsteps. The girl's eyes widened at the sight of a human in a gray infrastructure uniform crossing into their strip. Her spine stiffened. Her hand moved closer to her mother's tray, as if ready to pull it away and run. Felix stopped at the edge of their table. "This seat taken?" he asked. He kept his tone even. No big smile, no attempt at charm. Just a simple question. Arin's fingers tightened on the edge of her tray. A flicker of alarm ran across her face. She had learned the hard way that humans who crossed the sign usually brought trouble. Warnings, fines, checks on varied compliance. "This is non-citizen seating," she said. Her accent was heavy, but her words were clear, shaped by years of listening in order to keep her job in the lower docks. "You should eat inside. If someone sees you, they will ask you questions. They like questions. They like answers they already chose." He set his tray down anyway. "Then let them ask," he said, pulling the bench out and sitting. "I'll give them new answers." Shiva watched every movement. Her eyes tracked his hands, his shoulders, the small shifts in his face. Fear tightened her chest. She pushed it down. Fear never helped. "You are not supposed to sit here," she said. "The last man who came here moved our table closer to the vent and told us our air was dirty." Felix cut a piece of Rex meat. The knife scraped softly against the metal plate. "What did he measure?" he asked. Shiva blinked. "Measure? Did he run an air sample?" Felix said, "Use a scanner. A proper one." "He used his nose," she said. Arin exhaled sharply, the sound half bitter humor, half anger. "He said he could smell the difference," she said, "from a whole 2 steps closer to the vent. We are very dangerous from those 2 steps." "He must have a very sensitive nose," Felix said. "Mine just smells bad coffee." He took a bite of the meat. The outer layer was dry, the inside still a little stringy. It tasted like someone had tried to hide its cheap origin with too much salt. Shiva's gaze dropped to his tray. Her eyes fixed on the berries in the small cup, then jerked away again. She lifted her spoon, then lowered it, caught between wanting to eat what she had and wanting the thing she did not. Felix noticed the motion. He followed the line of her stare to the dessert, then back to her thin arms and the way her knees looked too sharp under the hem of her dress. He felt a twist of something uncomfortable. He had seen hunger before on mine stations and failed colonies, in queues for ration handouts where nobody sat down because sitting meant giving up your place. This felt smaller in scale, but no less sharp. He nudged the cup slightly in her direction. "I always forget these," he said. "End up leaving them. Would you help me this time, or will I insult the kitchen by wasting it again?" Shiva froze. Her spoon stopped halfway between bowl and mouth. Her first thought was that there had to be a condition. Humans who gave things usually wanted something spoken or unspoken. "We cannot pay you." she said. We do not have credits now. Maybe next cycle if I help at the dock again. You just did pay, Felix said. You told me about the man with the nose. That was useful. Take the berries. Arin's eyebrows drew together. We do not need charity, she said. Felix met her eyes. You need food, he said. I can see bone on your child's wrists. That is not a debate. Shame and anger punched through Arin's chest in the same moment. Her fingers dug into the metal edge of the tray until the knuckles paled. She hated being measured like that. She hated that he was not wrong. Shiva looked between them rapidly. Her stomach cramped again. Hope and guilt knotted together under her ribs. Ma, she said in a small voice, if I eat them, I will walk faster later. They will make me very efficient. That is good for work. The logic was childish, but direct. Arin's jaw worked. Then she sighed once, the sound rough. You will say thank you, she said. Shiva nodded quickly. She pulled the cup toward her with careful fingers, as if it might be snatched away, and dipped the spoon in. Thank you, she whispered. The berries were softer than they looked, skin breaking under the spoon. Syrup clung to the metal. When she put the first spoonful in her mouth, the sweetness hit her so fast, it almost hurt. Her lips parted around the taste. For a brief second, the noise of the vents faded under that simple sensation. She swallowed and swallowed again, as if to keep the flavor from escaping. Felix watched her face shift from tension to surprise and then to something close to relief. It tightened his throat. Inside the hall, a supervisor in a crisp blue jacket noticed the human inspector sitting on the wrong side of the glass. The man pushed his chair back and walked to the partition. His boots struck the floor with that particular hard, short step of someone used to people moving around him. He lifted his hand and rapped his knuckles against the glass in 3 sharp taps. Felix's eyes flicked up. The supervisor gestured once toward the inner hall with a tilt of his head. The polite version of an order. Felix held the man's gaze. He felt the familiar tug of 2 different instincts. One told him to get up, take his tray, and walk back inside. Keep the peace. Stay deployable. Keep his name off problem lists. The other reminded him of why he had left his home station in the first place. Of the argument with a mine foreman who had been willing to let faulty supports ride another quarter because the collapse models only predicted casualties in the non-essential housing tiers. Of how he had filed the report anyway, bypassed 3 levels of management, and been quietly shuffled from permanent post to traveling inspector. He felt annoyance first. It sat hot behind his ribs. It sharpened his thoughts. He lifted his mug instead and took a slow drink of coffee. The supervisor's lips pressed into a thin, mean line. He tapped his comm band, turned away, and headed back into the crowd. You'll get a message, Arin said. Felix set the mug down. Probably, he said. You came here to fix power, she said. Not to argue about signs. I came here to keep people alive, he answered. Power is part of that. And we are not people, she said, watching him carefully. He felt anger tighten the muscles along his jaw. The feeling was not aimed at her. You look like people to me, he said. You eat when you can. You hurt when you have to walk too far. Your child worries more than a child should. That qualifies. Shiva, still working at the berries, looked up, syrup shining at the corner of her mouth. I'm very good at worrying, she said seriously. I started when they put the sign up. Before that, we sat close to the door. Now we sit near the vent, so our breath goes away faster. The man with the nose said that makes everyone safer. When did they put the sign up? Felix asked. 3 months, Arin said. After the last inspection from Central. They said air ratios needed correction. They moved us and said it was science. It was not science, Shiva added. It was moving. Felix's mouth twitched once despite himself. He felt curiosity push alongside irritation now. He wanted to see the report that matched that sign. He wanted to know who had signed it. He cut into his grain block, the knife leaving a rough line through the dense, dry cube. The texture flaked under pressure, pale crumbs spilling to the plate. What do you do on Marrow 7? He asked Arin. Besides sit by this vent and entertain inspectors. Her fingers shifted over the edge of her tray at the mention of work. Shame and frustration rose. I used to clean the lower docks, she said. Water, oil, whatever spilled. They gave us chits for food, space in Tier 5. The work was simple. Her hand moved unconsciously toward her side. Then the water made my kidneys sick. Walking all day on cold floors did the rest. I slowed down. Her lips tightened. They do not enjoy slow workers. They cut her hours, Shiva said, angry now. Then they cut them more. Then they said there were no hours. Only rent. Rent did not get smaller. So now, Felix asked. Now I am useful in other ways, Arun said. I make sure this one still breathes. She nodded toward Shiva. I carry water as far as I can. I stand in lines. I wait. Shiva scraped the last of the syrup from the cup. She hesitated, then hid one berry under the rim, pushing it into the syrup film. Saving that, Felix asked. For later, she said, when my bones forget they ate. I can remind them. He nodded once, as if she had just explained a technical solution. You have been on Marrow, 7 long, Arun asked. First assignment here, he said. I go where the office sends me. 3 months on, 2 weeks off, then somewhere else. Before this, I was on an or ring close to the belt. Before that, a fuel depot. Plenty of ceilings to look at. Shiva frowned slightly. You fix lights in all the ceilings? She asked. I tell people how they're going to break, he said. Then I write how to stop that happening. Sometimes they listen. Sometimes they wait until something cracks. Why did you take that work? Arun asked. He felt the question land deeper than she had probably intended. He remembered the mine station he had grown up on. His father's hands always stained with dust. The sound of rock shifts in the night. The day a support beam gave out and 2 tiers collapsed. And how he had stood in a hallway full of dust, listening to people scream under concrete while the foreman insisted the collapse risk had been within model range. He did not want that hallway again. I like when things stay standing, he said, and I'm good at seeing where they won't. Shiva studied his face with the intense focus of a child who could already tell when an adult skipped pieces of an answer. Does anyone look where we sit? She asked, to see if it will break. He looked at the vent behind them, at the rust on the bolts, at the way condensation gathered on the lip of the duct and dripped down to the floor near their feet. Yes, he said, at least today. Arun looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Before this, I was on an or ring close to the belt. Before that, a fuel depot. Plenty of ceilings to look at. Shiva frowned slightly. You fix lights in all the ceilings? She asked. I tell people how they're going to break, he said. Then I write how to stop that happening. Sometimes they listen. Sometimes they wait until something cracks. Why did you take that work? Arun asked. He felt the question land deeper than she had probably intended. He remembered the mine station he had grown up on. His father's hands always stained with dust. The sound of rock shifts in the night. He had been there for less than 15 minutes, and already the weight of his choices pressed against the path he had walked the last 7 years. Stay small, solve technical problems, avoid policy fights. That had been the agreement he had made with himself to keep from burning out. He saw Shiva's thin wrist he had already measured. He saw the way Arun tried to sit without leaning on anything so the pain in her side would not show. He understood he had lied to himself about what his mission here was. It was not only about cables and load charts. One man with a tray, sitting under the wrong sign, was not going to remake Marrow 7 in a day. He knew that. He planned to start smaller. He planned to make sure the woman in front of him did not collapse in a corridor because officials had decided her kidneys were an acceptable loss. Shiva lifted the spoon one last time and licked it clean, then set it carefully back into the empty cup. That was very efficient, she said solemnly. I feel almost like 2 people now. Felix allowed himself a brief smile. That is good, he said. There are 3 of us at this table. We need numbers. The vents hummed. The inner hall's noise bled faintly through the glass. Somewhere to his left, the supervisor sent a report he would read later. For now, Felix stayed where he was, on the cold outer bench, with his back to the sign and his plate between a woman who could barely hold her spoon and a child who had learned to talk like a worker long before she finished being a child. The message from Supervisor Larek arrived on Felix's wristband as a vibrating pulse just as he set his cup down. He didn't read it immediately. The timing told him enough. Inside the main hall, Larek was likely waiting for a reply he wouldn't get yet. Shiva leaned forward. eyes scanning his face. "Is your boss angry?" she asked. Felix shrugged once. "Probably." He kept his tone calm. "He'll write something long. I'll read it later." Aaron shifted on the bench. The movement looked small, but the pain that followed was not. Her hand rose and pressed lightly against her right side again. Her breath tightened. Felix noticed the way she tried to hide it, turning her face slightly toward the vent so Shiva wouldn't see. Shiva saw anyway. She moved closer to her mother, shoulder touching Aaron's arm. "Ma, we should go," she whispered. "The walk back takes time." Felix glanced at the outer corridor connected to the cafeteria. The metal floor beyond the transparent wall was streaked with condensation. Workers stepped past without acknowledging the two green-skinned figures outside. No one slowed. No one asked if Aaron could make the walk. "How far is your place?" Felix asked. Aaron's eyes flicked to him, cautious. "Tier 5, she said. "Block B, near the coolant vents. 20 minutes if I walk fast. 40 if I don't." Felix thought about the slope of the ramps leading into the lower tiers. He had walked down there earlier that morning while tracing the surge line in the outer medical wing. Even he felt the cold bite through his boots. Someone in Aaron's condition would feel it 10 times sharper. He pushed his tray aside. "I'll walk you both back." Shiva brightened instantly, almost startled by her own relief. "You know the way?" she asked. "I was in your tier today," Felix said, checking the conduit path. Aaron studied him for a long second. Pride hadn't left her. She weighed the offer, the cost of refusing, and the strain of accepting. "You're not responsible for us," she said quietly. "I know," he answered. Shiva tugged her mother's sleeve. "Ma, the stairs hurt you last time." Aaron's jaw tensed. She adjusted her shawl around her shoulders and stood slowly. The dress under it shifted with the movement, revealing more of the hollow just beneath her ribs. She steadied herself on the table's edge. Felix stood too. He picked up both trays, stacked them cleanly, and carried them to the return slot. He didn't ask Aaron again. He sensed the line between helping and embarrassing her, and he stayed on the better side of it. When the three of them stepped into the outer corridor, the temperature dropped another few degrees. The air smelled faintly of damp metal and the ocean below. The corridor lights flickered once before stabilizing. The walk began in silence. Aaron walked with one arm wrapped around her abdomen, her steps careful and deliberate. Each time her foot hit the ground, she paused for a heartbeat, as though gauging whether the next step would be manageable. Felix adjusted his pace without making it obvious. Shiva stayed close to her mother's side, braid bouncing lightly against her back. Every few steps, she glanced up at Felix, as if checking he was truly still there. Halfway down the ramp, the metal underfoot vibrated as a cargo tram passed far above. The sound echoed down through the walls like distant thunder. Aaron stopped walking for a moment, bracing herself with a hand against the railing. "Are you dizzy?" Felix asked. "No," she said, though her fingers curled tighter around the rail. Shiva looked at her mother's hand and then at Felix. "She gets dizzy when she's hungry," she said, "or when her kidneys make her too tired." Aaron closed her eyes briefly. "Shiva, it's true," Shiva insisted softly. Felix exhaled through his nose, steadying his own thoughts. He understood exhaustion, injury, and long-term strain. He could see all three layered into Aaron's posture. "Lean on the rail," he said. "Take your time." Aaron's eyes opened again. They stayed focused on the metal floor. "We need water before we go home," she said. "The pump near our block works only some hours. If we miss it today, we wait until cycle shift. Then we stop there first," Felix said. Aaron opened her mouth as if to argue, then closed it. She started walking again. They reached the water pump a few minutes later. The pump was an old model, fitted into the wall behind a rust-stained grate. A narrow queue had formed, mostly non-human residents holding dented containers. Aaron stepped in a line, her breathing shallow. Shiva reached in her dress pocket and pulled out a folded chit, edges soft from being held too often. Felix glanced at the chit. "How much is one fill?" "2," Shiva said. "We have 4. Aaron's hand covered her daughter's. "We will manage." Felix stepped forward and extended his wristband toward the scanner on the pump panel. The small screen blinked. Authorized payment, 2 credit units. Felix scanned. Aaron stiffened. No, she said sharply. You will not. It's done, he said. You cannot afford to keep doing things for us. I can afford 2 credits. Aaron's frustration pushed through the exhaustion, sharp and direct. We are strangers to you. Why do you spend anything on us? Why do you sit at our table? Felix didn't answer immediately. He watched the container fill, clear water splashing against metal. The hum of the pump vibrated through the wall. He wasn't used to explaining himself. His work rarely required it. But Aaron wasn't an administrator or a foreman. She wasn't asking to interrogate him. She wanted to understand something real. You didn't choose this, he said finally. None of this. The vent seating, the water lines in Tier 5, the hours they cut. You're carrying weight from someone else's rules. I can lighten one piece of it. Aaron held his gaze. Her face wasn't soft, but something in her eyes shifted. Shiva whispered, Ma, he's only helping with water. It's not like he bought a ship. That made Aaron's mouth twitch, the closest she had come to a smile all day. When the container finished filling, Felix lifted it by the handle. The weight pulled at his shoulder, not heavy for him, but he knew how it would strain Aaron's side. We need to walk slow, Aaron said. The path slopes down. Felix nodded. Slow is fine. They continued through the lower corridor. Pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping occasionally. The air smelled of coolant and old salt. Ambient lights buzzed overhead. Shiva eventually found her voice again. Felix, she said, speaking his name carefully, testing the sound. What is your home like? He glanced at her. Dry, he said. Dusty. Mining station in orbit over a broken moon. No rivers. No green. Just rock and noise. Shiva wrinkled her nose. No green sounds sad. It was, he admitted. But people there try to take care of each other when they could. Aaron listened in silence, her steps measured. My father said people take care of their own, Shiva said. But we don't have our own anymore. We have only us. Aaron reached down and touched Shiva's shoulder lightly. Felix carried the water container with one hand and kept the other at his side, fingers flexing now and then from the cold. He wasn't used to the damp chill of Marrow 7's lower tiers. It crawled into the seams of his uniform. What about you? He asked. Before Marrow 7. Aaron hesitated. Before, she said slowly, there was water we could drink and soil we could touch. There were days I did not feel weak after walking. Shiva played in the river and never coughed after. Shiva added, there were trees. Real ones, not the ones behind glass upstairs. Aaron's voice grew quieter, but there was no work left and no food. We came here because Marrow 7 said they needed labor. And they did, Felix said. They needed labor, Aaron repeated, but not lives. They turned the corner into Tier 5's main hallway. It was dimmer here. The overhead strips flickered. More coolant pipes ran exposed along the walls, rattling softly. Pod doors lined both sides. Some had faint chalk markings above them, symbols or names in different languages. A few doors stood open, residents sitting on metal crates near the thresholds, watching silently as Aaron, Shiva, and Felix passed. Aaron stopped in front of a door marked with a simple hand-painted spiral. The paint was cracked at the edges. This is us, she said. Felix set the water container down carefully beside the door. The weight thudded against the deck. Shiva hurried to tap the door panel. The door opened halfway with a sticky hiss, then jammed until she hit it once with her palm. It slid open the rest of the way. Inside, the room was small, barely 3 meters wide for deep. A single wall bed folded down. A metal table stood against the wall with one chair. On the table sat a jar with 2 dried herbs inside, a dented cup, and a small bundle of patched fabric. Felix stepped back, giving them space. You should go, Aaron said, leaning on the doorframe. She looked exhausted, but her voice held steadiness. You have your work. Your boss is waiting to scold you. He can wait, Felix said. Aaron inhaled slowly through her nose. Her ribs expanded with effort. You helped us today, she said. I will not forget. Felix nodded once. I'll check the conduit paths again tomorrow. I'll be in this area. If you need anything, leave your door light on. Aaron studied him, unsure how much to believe. unsure if believing would cost her later. Shiva stepped forward. "Will you eat with us again?" she asked, simple and direct. Felix looked at her thin braid, the berry stain still near her lip. "If I'm here during your meal," he said, "yes." Shiva's eyes softened, relief showing openly for the first time. Aaron placed a hand on Shiva's back and guided her inside. Felix stepped away from the doorway and began walking back up the corridor, boots echoing against the metal decking. The cold followed him, but so did something else, an unease settling into his chest. He had come to Marrow 7 to fix power faults, write reports, and keep quiet. Now he had seen something he couldn't file as a technical issue. And for the first time on this assignment, he knew he would not be keeping quiet. Felix reached the lift that connected Tier 5 to the mid-levels and pressed the call pad. The metal doors took several seconds to respond. While he waited, he rubbed his palms together, trying to warm them. The cold from the lower corridor clung to his skin. The lift arrived with a dull chime, and he stepped inside. The doors slid shut, cutting off the damp, metallic smell of the lower tier. As the lift moved upward, the vibration through the floor plate felt inconsistent. A faint judder. He filed that away. Another point to check later. When the doors opened into Tier 3, warmer air brushed across his face. The lights here were steady, not flickering. Foot traffic was heavier. Workers talked in low voices, most heading toward the evening shift start. His wristband blinked again. Message from Larek Halvin, supervisor. Felix opened it while walking. "Inspector Hale, your presence in a non-citizen zone without authorization has been reported. Meet in admin level 2 room 4A at 1700. Discouraged actions will be addressed." He closed the message and kept walking. There was no anger in his expression, only a slow tightening around his mouth. Larek knew how to choose words that looked polite while carrying a threat. Felix had dealt with men like him before, self-appointed gatekeepers who mistook order for morality. He took the side corridor leading to Maintenance Hub West. The hum of generators pulsed behind the walls. A cart of replacement filters sat near the doorway, tags half peeled from moisture. Inside the hub, 2 technicians worked at a bench, sorting cables. One of them, Rel, a man with oil-stained gloves and a shaved head, glanced up. "Inspector," Rel said, "you're late for the diagnostics review." "I stopped for lunch," Felix said, placing the portable tablet on the counter, which turned into something else. Rel snorted. "Something else sounds like trouble." Felix didn't answer. He opened the diagnostics report, scrolling through voltage charts and fluctuation logs. Rel leaned closer. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Rel said. "Or management." "Management," Felix replied. "Which is worse?" Rel laughed once. "Depends on the ghost." Felix tapped a segment on the chart. The surge in the outer medical wing isn't random. The conduit splits near Tier 5. It's overloaded. The system compensates until it can't anymore. Rel frowned. "Tier 5? No one replaces anything down there unless it's already leaking on someone's head." "I noticed," Felix said. Rel pointed a thumb at the corridor. "The part you need is in Storage East. Shelf 4, top row. The request for replacement was denied last year. Budget freeze." Felix closed the tablet. "I'll get myself." "You pick that fight," Rel said, "and Larek will be on your back until the quarter ends." "He already is." Rel shook his head. "Then make it worth it." Felix left through the opposite corridor, the one that led to Storage East. The lights here buzzed faintly with each step he took. He passed 2 crew members who stepped aside to let him through, glancing at the inspector tag on his uniform. Most inspectors ignored lower-tier issues unless there was a direct operational risk. Felix wasn't most inspectors. Storage East was dim inside. Shelves stacked with old parts lined the walls. A cold draft moved through gaps in the bulkhead. Felix found the conduit segment he needed, dusty, wrapped in faded plastic, and pulled it free. He checked the seal. Intact. Usable. As he turned to leave, footsteps approached from behind. "Inspector Hale." Larek's voice, smooth and thin. Felix didn't turn immediately. He placed the conduit under his arm, then faced the supervisor. Larek wore a blue jacket pressed crisp at the seams. His hair was combed back with precision. His expression held the polite sharpness of someone who had rehearsed it. "You received my message," Larek said. "I did," Felix replied. "And yet you didn't come." "I'm working." Larek's eyes lowered to the conduit. "That part was removed from the requisition list." "I know. So why are you carrying it?" "Because the system downstairs is failing," Felix said. "It needs replacing." Larek clasped his hands behind his back. "Tier 5 is not a priority zone. It's connected to a priority zone," Felix said. "The medical wing. The medical wing has backup shielding." Felix lifted his chin slightly. "Temporary shielding. It wasn't designed to carry this load long term." Larek's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Inspector, you are here to observe, document, and submit reports, not to revise the outpost's infrastructure policies." "I'm here to prevent system collapse," Felix said. "That's my assignment order." "You interpret too much into your role," Larek replied. Felix took a slow breath through his nose. "If that conduit burns out," he said, "dialysis units will shut down. Oxygen flow will drop. Somebody will pay for that decision. I'd rather it not be the people at the bottom of the list." Larek stepped closer. The metal floor barely creaked beneath his polished boots. "Your behavior in the cafeteria today was already noted as inappropriate involvement. Now you intend to interfere with authorized equipment allocations." Felix tightened his grip on the conduit. "I intend to keep the system from failing." "And endanger your contract," Larek said softly. Felix felt heat build in his chest, restrained but clear. "I've had worse contracts." Larek tilted his head. "You should remember that outposts choose their inspectors. And inspectors who complicate matters rarely get selected again." Felix's voice stayed steady. "Then choose someone else next time." The supervisor's expression flickered. Surprise, brief and sharp. Then irritation. "You're one cycle away from review. I would strongly advise you not to push further." Felix stepped past him. "I'll send you the updated fault report tonight." Larek didn't move to stop him. "Inspector Hale," he called after him, "do not continue this path." Felix didn't look back. "I'm already on it." He walked out of storage east and into the brighter main corridor. His jaw ached from holding tension. He wasn't afraid of Larek's threat. What unsettled him was the clear pattern. Marrow 7 didn't neglect lower-tier systems by accident. It was deliberate, structured, and hidden beneath polite language. He headed back toward the central lift, conduit under his arm. Halfway down the corridor, his wristband vibrated again, an alert from the medical wing. He opened it. Outer medical. Power fluctuation detected. Severity, moderate. The timing was too perfect. He pivoted and changed direction. When he reached the outer medical wing, the lights were flickering in uneven pulses. Nurses moved quickly between stations, securing equipment. A Sarathan patient sat on a cot, knees pulled to his chest, watching the ceiling anxiously. A technician noticed Felix. "Inspector, voltage dropped 3 times in the last hour. Shielding caught it, but if it accelerates, it will," Felix said. "Where's the conduit junction?" "Tier 5 landing," the technician replied. "Behind the access grate." Felix didn't ask permission. He headed straight for the stairwell. He descended the metal steps quickly. The colder air wrapped around him again, sharper than before. When he reached the landing near Tier 5, he found the access grate already vibrating faintly with strain. He knelt, removed the screws, and pulled the grate aside. Inside, the old conduit was glowing faintly at the joints, overheating. He didn't hesitate. He set the new conduit beside him and began disconnecting the old one, fingers working fast despite the heat radiating through the gloves. Footsteps approached behind him. He kept working. "If that's you, Larek," Felix said, "you're too late to stop this." But it wasn't Larek. It was Shiva. She stood barefoot at the base of the stairs, her braid loose, dress rumpled from having run. Her small chest rose and fell rapidly. "Ma collapsed," she said. She tried to stand, and she fell. "I couldn't lift her." Felix froze for only a fraction of a second. Then he tightened the last bolt on the new conduit with controlled force. The glow steadied. The hum in the walls leveled. He pushed himself to his feet. "Where is she?" he asked. Shiva swallowed hard. "In our room. She won't wake up right." Felix grabbed the tools, shoved them into the kit, and closed the grate with one motion. "Take me," he said. Shiva didn't wait. She turned and ran, her bare feet tapping sharply against the metal floor. Felix followed, his boots striking harder. As they reached the row of pods, neighbors stepped aside, silent. Some watched with worry. Some looked away. The door marked with the hand-painted spiral was half open. Inside, Aaron lay on the floor beside the wall bed, shawl twisted beneath her. Her skin had gone paler, almost gray-green. She breathed in short, shallow pulls. One hand clutched her side, knuckles white. Felix dropped to his knees beside her. "Aaron, can you hear me?" he asked. Her eyes opened halfway, unfocused. She tried to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. Felix touched her forehead. "Cold. Too cold. What happened?" he asked Shiva. She tried to stand. She said she was fine, but she wasn't. Felix slipped one arm under Aaron's shoulders, another beneath her knees. She weighed almost nothing. "We're going to the medical wing," he said. "Now." Shiva nodded, tears gathering but not falling. She wiped them on her sleeve and ran ahead to open the door wider. Felix lifted Aaron into his arms and stepped into the hallway, the cold air pushing against him. He adjusted his grip around her. Her head fell against his shoulder. He started walking, fast, steady, focused. He didn't know what Larek would say about this, or what consequences waited up on the admin level. He only knew one thing with complete clarity. He was not losing her. Felix reached the medical wing doors with Aaron in his arms and Shiva gripping the back of his uniform to keep pace. The automatic panel struggled for a moment before sliding open halfway. He kicked the lower frame gently until it opened enough to let him through. Inside, the lights were steadier than Tier 5s, but the air felt stale. A nurse looked up from a terminal, her expression shifting instantly when she saw Aaron limp against Felix's shoulder. "Room 4, she said, already moving. Set her on the cot." Felix followed, lowering Aaron onto the narrow bed. The mattress compressed sharply under her weight. A monitoring strip connected to the wall flickered, then steadied. The nurse checked Aaron's pulse, her fingers pressing firmly along the wrist. She frowned. "She's dehydrated," the nurse said, and her right kidney swelling. "How long has she had pain here?" Aaron tried to speak, but her throat wouldn't shape the words. Felix answered instead. "At least a day, maybe longer." Shiva stood on tiptoe to see the monitor. "She had pain yesterday too," she whispered. She said walking would smooth it out. The nurse didn't ask why Aaron hadn't come sooner. Her expression already held the answer. Non-citizens avoided medical scans unless they had no other choice. "We need to flush the infection," the nurse said, "and she needs fluids." Felix watched as the nurse prepared the 4-line. The fluid bag was thin and clear. The tubing connected with a soft click. Aaron winced when the needle entered her arm, but her breath deepened slightly afterward. Shiva climbed onto the edge of the bed and laid both hands on her mother's blanket. "Is she going to sleep?" "She'll rest," the nurse said. "Her body needs it." Aaron's eyelids fluttered. She turned her head toward Felix. "You shouldn't be here," she murmured, voice thin. "I am," he said. Shiva looked at Felix, then at the nurse. "Can I stay here?" "You can stay in the waiting room," the nurse answered. "Only staff inside during treatment." Shiva's mouth tightened, but she nodded. Felix placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "I'll stay with you," he said. The nurse began adjusting the equipment. Felix stepped back as Shiva took one last look at her mother, then followed him out. The waiting area held 6 chairs, a cracked screen on the wall showing outdated weather reports, and a table with a dispenser of nutrient bars few people touched. The bars were wrapped in cheap foil, pale yellow through the translucent packaging, grain compressed with stabilizers, barely flavored. Shiva chose the chair closest to the treatment door. Her legs dangled off the edge, not reaching the floor. She kept her braid clutched in one hand like a rope. Felix sat beside her. For a while, they said nothing. The walls hummed with the low vibration of the filtration system above. Footsteps echoed faintly from deeper in the wing. Shiva eventually broke the silence. "She didn't want you to see her like that." "I know," Felix said. "She thinks if humans see weakness, Shiva continued. They will tell her not to work anymore. And if she doesn't work, they will take our room. Felix rested his elbows on his knees, hands clasped loosely. Your room is barely large enough for both of you. It is ours, Shiva said quietly. That is enough. Felix considered his words carefully. How long has she been sick? Shiva leaned her head against the chair back. Since before we met you. She hides it. She walks slower now. Sometimes she stops when she thinks I am not looking. Felix felt pressure build behind his ribs. He turned his gaze to the hallway, where nurses passed, each focused on tasks that had nothing to do with Tier 5. Did she ever go to a doctor before? He asked. Shiva shook her head. They ask too many questions. And they check your ID. If your work hours are too low, they send reports. Felix understood. Reports meant evaluations. Evaluations meant cuts. Cuts meant displacement. After several minutes, the nurse returned. She motioned for Felix. She's stable for now, the nurse said. But the infection isn't new. She's been carrying it a long time. She needs monitored care for a few days. And the cost? Felix asked. The nurse hesitated only briefly. Non-citizen care isn't fully covered. There's a daily fee. Say the number. 32 credits per cycle. Felix knew Shiva had 4 credits on her. Aaron probably had no more than a handful left. I'll handle it, he said. The nurse nodded once. She's lucky you brought her now. Another day, and her kidney might have started shutting down. Felix exhaled slowly. Can we see her? Not yet. She's resting. He returned to the waiting room. Shiva looked up at him with wide, tense eyes. Is she worse? Shiva asked, voice trembling but controlled. She's resting, Felix said, sitting beside her again. She's getting what she needs. Shiva swallowed hard. You paid, didn't you? Felix didn't answer directly. She'll stay here until she's strong enough to walk without pain. Shiva absorbed that in silence. Her fingers twisted the edge of her dress, the old curtain fabric worn thin under her touch. After a moment, she asked something that had clearly been sitting inside her since the cafeteria. Why do you help us? Felix leaned back, letting his head rest against the wall. He hadn't planned on forming attachments on this outpost. His job was to fix systems, document risks, and move on before anyone expected more. But Aaron collapsing had shifted something that wasn't going to shift back. You deserve help, he said. That is not what most humans here think. Felix turned slightly, looking at her directly. Then they're wrong. Shiva blinked at that answer, as if unused to hearing something so plain. Her voice softened. She will want to thank you when she wakes. She doesn't need to, Felix said. She just needs to get better. Shiva pulled her feet up onto the chair and hugged her knees. The braid slipped forward over her shoulder. She rested her chin on her arms. Will you come tomorrow too? She asked. Felix didn't hesitate. Yes. She nodded once, trusting the answer with surprising certainty. Hours passed. Nurses moved in and out of the treatment wing. A man in a stained jumpsuit limped into the waiting area and sat several chairs away, holding his side. 2 children were brought in with burns from a broken heater. Felix saw life in the lower tiers reflected in all of them. People too used to carrying pain until it forced them through these doors. Eventually, the nurse returned. She's awake. Shiva jumped to her feet. Felix stood, steadying her when she nearly tipped forward in a rush. They walked together down the corridor. The nurse opened the door. Aaron lay elevated on the cot, blanket pulled to her chest. Her breathing was deeper now. Her eyes found Shiva first, then Felix. Relief washed through her features, small but unmistakable. Shiva rushed to the bedside. Ma, you scared me. I'm here, Aaron whispered. I'm not going anywhere. Felix stepped closer. Aaron's gaze shifted to him, grateful, uneasy, humbled. You shouldn't have carried me, she said. You weren't walking, he replied. You paid for this. You needed it. Aaron closed her eyes briefly, accepting what she couldn't change. Shiva crawled gently onto the lower edge of the bed, careful not to disturb the tubing. I can stay here, right? The nurse answered. Only for tonight. One visitor. Felix stepped back. She stays, he said. I'll come in the morning. Aaron looked at him again. Her voice steadied, even with fatigue weighing it down. You have done too much already. Felix shook his head. Not enough. He didn't explain what he meant. He didn't need to. He turned to leave, giving mother and daughter space. But before he stepped through the door, he heard Aaron call his name, quiet, almost unsure. Felix. He looked back. Thank you, she said, the words carrying more weight than anything she'd said before. Not for the money, for seeing us. Felix met her eyes. I'll be here in the morning, he said. And for the first time since arriving on Marrow 7, the path ahead of him felt like one he wasn't walking alone. Felix returned early the next morning, long before the shift alarms sounded across Marrow 7. The corridors were quieter at this hour, lit only by half-power strips that hummed with a low, steady pulse. His boots echoed softly as he crossed the junction into the outer medical wing, a cup of Ferland seed coffee in his hand and a tight heaviness in his chest he refused to name. The nurse from last night recognized him immediately. She raised an eyebrow, but didn't question his presence. She's awake, she said. Weak, but improving. Felix nodded once. And the fee? It posted to your account at sunrise. Her tone wasn't judgmental, just matter of fact. You'll need to renew it if she stays in another cycle. I will. As he approached Aaron's room, he slowed without meaning to. Shiva was sitting on a small stool beside the bed, her legs pulled up, her braid messy from sleep. When she saw Felix, her face brightened with unfiltered relief. You came back, she said. I said I would. He set the coffee down on the unused counter and walked closer. Aaron lay, propped up on pillows, wrapped in the thin clinic blanket. Her skin still looked pale, but her eyes were clearer, more focused. A faint warmth had returned to her cheeks. You are here early, she said. Felix pulled the second stool closer. Couldn't sleep. Shiva slid down from her seat. I saved you something. She reached in her pocket and pulled out a crushed nutrient bar, still wrapped in foil. I didn't eat it last night. Felix accepted it, surprised. You didn't have to save anything. I know, she said, but I wanted to. Aaron watched the exchange with quiet awareness, something thoughtful behind her eyes. What does your side feel? Felix asked her. Like someone tied a rope around my ribs and pulled tight, she said. But the fever is gone. She shifted slightly, hand resting near the blanket's edge. The nurse says I need to stay one more night. Felix exhaled slowly. Good. Your body needs the rest. Aaron studied him. You, talk like you know this pain. I've seen it. Her skin still looked pale, but her eyes were clearer, more focused. A faint warmth had returned to her cheeks. You are here early, she said. In miners. In workers who kept going until something broke. His voice stayed even. I know what happens when people push past limits because they think they don't have a choice. Aaron looked down at her hands. The blanket rose and fell with her breathing, slow, measured. We never had many choices, she said. Shiva leaned forward, gripping her mother's arm gently. We have some now. Felix caught the girl's tone, small but certain. She had changed overnight, more grounded, more confident with his presence. Aaron noticed it too. Shiva, she said quietly, can you go to the dispenser and get water? Shiva nodded and slipped out the door with quick, quiet steps. When the room was silent, Aaron looked directly at Felix. She trusts you, she said. Felix didn't look away. I know, she doesn't trust easily. I figured. Aaron lifted a hand and touched the tubing taped to her arm. You brought me here. You paid for this. You walked us home. You sat with her until she slept. She paused. Why? Felix thought for a moment, searching for a response that didn't hide behind practicality. Because nobody else did, he said. Aaron's eyes softened, but her voice stayed steady. You barely know us. I know enough, he replied. A shadow crossed her face. Not fear, but something like uncertainty wrapped in gratitude. She had been strong for so long, without help, that letting someone step in felt unfamiliar. She shifted slightly, wincing. Felix instinctively moved forward, stopping himself just before reaching out. I'm fine, she murmured. Just stiff. You don't have to be fine, Felix said. Not today. Her lips parted slightly at the tone, gentle, not commanding. Shiva returned, holding a small plastic cup with both hands. She handed it to her mother, then climbed back onto the stool. Ma, she said, the nurse said you can eat something later. Aaron smiled faintly. Only if it doesn't taste like boiled cardboard. Shiva grinned. It probably does. Felix sat back, letting the moment settle. Seeing them together, Aaron recovering, Shiva more relaxed, cut through something tight inside him. He wasn't sure when the shift had happened, but he felt it. They were no longer strangers he had stumbled across. They were people he had chosen to stand beside. Shiva looked at him suddenly. "Felix, what do you do when you're not fixing wires?" The question caught him off guard. He cleared his throat. "Sleep, walk, take notes. Try not to argue with supervisors." "Do you have family?" she asked. Aaron shot her a small warning look, but Felix waved it off gently. "No," he said. "Not here. Not anywhere close." Shiva studied him with quiet seriousness. "We don't have anyone either," she said. "Except each other. And now, maybe you." Aaron stiffened slightly. "Shiva." Felix spoke first. "I'm not going anywhere." Aaron's eyes drifted down, the reaction small but unmistakable, relief mixed with confusion. Shiva leaned against her mother's arm again. "You can come home with us when she's better," she said. "You can check our vents and our lights and everything." Aaron sighed softly. "Shiva, he doesn't need to." "She's right," Felix said. "I can check the vents and the lights and anything else that needs fixing." Aaron looked up at him again, trying to measure the sincerity. "You said yesterday that your job is to keep things standing," she said. Felix nodded. "That's still the job." "And us?" she asked, the question so quiet he almost didn't hear it. He held her gaze. "You're standing too," he said. "I'm not letting that change." Aaron blinked once, long and slow. Her breath deepened. Her shoulders eased in a way that looked almost like releasing something she had carried alone. The nurse returned then, carrying a chart. "Visiting hours end in 15 minutes, she said gently. Shiva tensed. "Do we have to leave?" "For now," the nurse said. "Your mother needs rest." Shiva looked at Felix immediately. "You'll walk me back?" Felix nodded. "Of course." Aaron watched them both, a new worry appearing behind her eyes. "The lower tiers aren't safe for children alone this early," she admitted. "Please take her back." There was trust spoken aloud. "I will," Felix said. He stood. Shiva hopped off the stool and gave her mother a small, careful hug. "We'll be back," she said. "Sleep, Ma." Aaron touched her daughter's cheek, lingering. Then she looked at Felix once more. "Thank you," she said again, voice quiet but anchored. Felix gave a nod in return, simple, steady. He placed a hand lightly on Shiva's shoulder and guided her toward the hallway as the door slid shut behind them. As they walked, the cold tier air returned, but it felt different now. Less sharp with Shiva walking beside him, her small steps matching his stride. Somewhere between the medical wing and Tier 5, without speaking it aloud, Felix understood something. He wasn't just helping them get through today. He had already begun choosing them for tomorrow. The walk back to Tier 5 took longer than usual. Shiva stayed close to Felix's side, her hand occasionally brushing against the back of his fingers as if checking he was still there. The corridors were warming as shift change neared. More workers appeared, boots clanging on metal, voices echoing, steam drifting from open vents. But even with the noise building, Felix's thoughts stayed behind. In the quiet medical room where Aaron had looked at him with tired, steady eyes and said thank you like it cost her something to speak. When they reached the lower tier, Shiva stopped at the entrance to their block. "I can go inside," she said. "You should rest." Felix crouched to her level. "I will come back after shift. If anything happens before then, anything, go straight to the medical wing and tell them to call me." "Understand?" She nodded. "I will tell them your name loudly." He managed a faint smile at that. "Good." When she disappeared behind the pod door, Felix stood alone in the hallway for a few seconds, letting the stillness settle. He didn't like leaving Aaron there, even monitored. Her strength was thin. He had felt that when he lifted her, how easily his arms had wrapped around her, how light she had been. He headed back toward the upper tiers, but his mind stayed below. Later, when the cycle lamps dimmed into evening mode, Felix returned to the medical wing. He hesitated outside Aaron's door for only a breath before pressing the panel. The room lights were soft. Aaron was awake, leaning slightly against the raised bed. Her hair had come loose around her shoulders, the white strands falling across her collarbones. Without the shawl, her dress straps were visible, thin, worn fabric that dug lightly into her skin. She looked fragile, but for the first time, not tense. Shiva was asleep in the visitor's chair, curled up with her knees pulled to her chest, her braid covering half her face. Aaron looked at Felix when he entered. The faintest warmth touched her features. "You came back," she said quietly. "I said I would." She shifted, pushing herself up a little higher. "I'm glad you meant it." Felix walked closer. "How's your breathing?" "Better," she said. "My side aches less. My head, not so heavy now." Her voice was softer than before, smooth, unguarded. Felix pulled the stool to her bedside and sat. Aaron's gaze followed the movement, steady and curious. "You look tired," she said. "I should say the same to you." Aaron's lips curved slightly. "I nearly died yesterday. I'm allowed to look tired." Felix leaned his forearms on his thighs, studying her. Her skin still held a faint gray tint, but her eyes were sharper, more alive. He reached out slowly, checking her reaction, and brushed a loose strand of hair back behind her ear so it wouldn't tangle around the foreline. She inhaled quietly, not pulling away. "You don't have to do that," she murmured, though her voice didn't match the words. "You didn't like it?" he asked. "I didn't say that." Her cheeks warmed, just barely. He let his hand lower, but not far. Her gaze followed it, lingering on his fingers before lifting again to his face. "Felix," she said quietly, "no one touches me kindly." That should have changed a long time ago. Aaron studied him, long, searching, something shifting behind her eyes. "Why does it matter to you how I am touched?" "Because you deserve gentleness." He said it simply, not as a declaration, but as fact. Her breath caught, subtle but real. She looked toward the door, as if ensuring the nurse wasn't coming, then leaned toward him slightly, weak from illness but drawn by something else. "Sit closer," she said. Felix moved the stool until his knees nearly touched the side of her bed. Aaron lifted her hand, slow, hesitant, unsure of her right to do so, and placed it over his wrist. Her fingers were warm now, soft, lighter than he expected. "You carried me," she said. "I remember the heat of your chest. It felt safe." Felix turned his hand under hers so that their palms met. His fingertips slid against hers, the contact slow, deliberate. Aaron inhaled again, shallow, almost soundless. "You can lean on me," he said, "whenever you need." Her thumb brushed the inside of his wrist, testing the feel of his skin. The movement was small, intimate, new. "I don't know how to accept someone like that," she admitted. "You're already doing it." Aaron's eyes softened in a way he hadn't seen before, open, unshielded. She shifted on the cot, moving closer. The blanket fell slightly, revealing the curve of her shoulder and the strap of her thin dress. Felix's gaze followed the motion, then rose slowly to meet hers again. She saw it, his attention, his restraint, the quiet heat behind both. "You can touch me," she whispered. "Shiva's asleep," Felix said gently, checking. "She sleeps deeply when she's warm," Aaron said. "And she's warm now." Felix moved one hand toward her shoulder. His fingers brushed her bare skin, fever-warm, soft. Aaron released a slow breath at the contact, her eyes half closing. "It feels good," she whispered. His thumb traced the edge of her collarbone. Her body responded in small ways she couldn't hide. The slow arch of her neck, the subtle lift of her chest, the tension easing in her arms. "Tell me if anything hurts," he said. "It doesn't," she murmured. "Only when you stop." He didn't stop. His hand slid upward along her neck, cupping gently at the base where pulse met bone. Aaron leaned into him, her forehead brushing his. Their breaths mixed, hers warm and shallow, his steady but tightening. "I don't know why I trust you this fast," she said softly. Felix's lips brushed the side of her temple. Not quite a kiss, but close enough to make her breath stutter. "You trust me because I choose you," he said. "Not for a day, not for convenience. For as long as you let me." Her fingers curled in the fabric of his sleeve, pulling him closer. Their faces hovered inches apart, warm breath passing between them. Then stay, she whispered. I'm here. A quiet sound escaped her, half relief, half longing. She rested her forehead fully against his, her nose brushing lightly against his cheek. She didn't kiss him. She wasn't ready for that. But her body pressed near his, soft and warm, asking without words for closeness she'd never been allowed to want. Felix folded one arm around her back carefully, mindful of the foreline, letting her lean into the broad warmth of his chest. Her head fit just beneath his jaw. Aaron exhaled, deep, trembling, safe. He held her that way in the dim medical light, her breath warming the hollow of his throat, her fingers resting lightly against his pulse. And for the first time on Marrow 7, Aaron slept without fear, held against someone who refused to let her fall again. The room was still dark when Aaron woke. The low hum of the machines blended with the distant rumble of pipes running beneath the floor. Her cheek rested against something warm and solid. It took her a moment to remember she had fallen asleep on someone. Not alone, not cold, but held. Felix sat where he had been all night, back against the wall, head slightly tilted forward. One hand rested gently on her waist, steady and protective even in sleep. His other arm was draped behind her, keeping her close without trapping her. The blanket had slipped, leaving her shoulder bare against his chest. Aaron didn't move at first. She listened to his slow breathing. She studied the softness that only sleep carved into his face, the loosened jaw, the calm beneath the exhaustion. This man had spent his night keeping her safe without complaint. Her fingers tightened lightly around his shirt. She hadn't meant to hold him when she slept. She hadn't meant to need him so deeply. Yet her body had moved on its own, trusting him with weight she never gave anyone. Felix stirred, eyes blinking open. He looked down at her, confusion fading quickly into quiet warmth. "Morning," he murmured, voice rough from sleep. Aaron shifted only enough to see his face clearly, her cheek still against his chest. "You stayed the whole night." "I wasn't leaving you," he said. "Not when you were finally resting." Her eyes softened. "Your back must ache." "It does." He gave a small smile. "Worth it." Aaron lifted herself slightly, sliding her hand along his chest until she sat upright beside him. The blanket slipped down, exposing more of her shoulder and the upper curve of her arm. She didn't pull it back immediately. Felix's gaze followed the movement with quiet intensity, then returned to her eyes, respectful but undeniably drawn. She noticed, and instead of turning away, she let the moment stand. "You should lie down," she said. "I can sit on my own." Felix shook his head. "I'm fine. You need breakfast." "I'm not hungry yet," she said, though her stomach argued quietly. Felix pushed himself fully upright, stretching his arms before running a hand through his hair to settle it. He looked more tired today, but steadier too, like the decision he'd made yesterday had settled into him fully. A soft sound came from the visitor chair. Shiva blinked awake, rubbing her eyes with small fists. "Mama," she whispered. Aaron reached toward her immediately. Shiva climbed onto the bed and into her mother's side, hugging her tightly. Her eyes then drifted to Felix, widening as she saw him, sitting close. "You slept here?" she asked. Felix nodded. "Your mother needed rest." I made sure she got it. Shiva watched him for a long moment, then said quietly, "Thank you." No hesitation, no fear, just sincerity. Felix's chest tightened. "You're welcome." Aaron brushed a hand over Shiva's hair, then looked up at Felix again. Something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, trust, a growing bond neither had planned for. Before the moment could settle deeper, the door opened. Nurse Tala entered with a portable scanner. "Oh," she said, noticing Felix still seated on the bed. "You stayed." "He did," Aaron said before Felix could answer. Her tone carried something firm, something protective, like she wanted them to know his presence was not an intrusion. Tala checked the readings with quick, practiced movements. "Your numbers look good this morning. If they stay stable, the med team will move you to the main clinic before evening." Aaron nodded. Felix felt relief ease into his muscles. "Good," he said. "She needs proper care." Tala's eyes flicked to him. She hesitated. Aaron mentioned, "Your help with her housing record." Felix's expression didn't shift. I updated it. That update might draw attention, Talus said. Some won't like that a non-citizen has access to full treatment. Felix met her gaze calmly. They can send me every complaint they want. I'm not undoing anything. Aaron watched him, slowly realizing the weight of what he had risked. Tala exhaled. Then let me give you advice. Stay close. She'll need someone who can handle questions. I'm not going anywhere, Felix said. When Tala left, Aaron looked at him with a mix of wonder and tension. You are making enemies, she said. I've made worse, Felix replied. Aaron studied him. And you still choose this? Felix stepped closer to the bed. Shiva leaned against her mother, listening quietly. I choose you, he said. Both of you. Aaron's breath caught. Not with fear, but with something sharper, unexpected, wanted. You say that easily, she whispered. It isn't easy, he said, but it's true. She lowered her gaze for a moment, processing the weight of his words. When she looked back up, something inside her had shifted. A wall she kept around her heart eased open. Felix, she said softly, if I leave this place today, will you come with us? He nodded once. Always. Aaron reached for his hand. Not the hesitant touch from yesterday, not trembling or unsure. She took it fully, interlacing her fingers with his. He closed his hand around hers, steady and warm. Shiva watched them with quiet acceptance, leaning her head on Aaron's arm. Outside the window, the metal walkway lights flickered to life as day's shift began. Voices rose in the corridor, footsteps passing by, machinery whining through the walls. But inside the room, the air stayed still, held by the moment the three of them chose something different from the life Marrow, 7 expected. Aaron rested her head lightly against Felix's shoulder. You were a stranger, she said quietly. Now you feel close. Felix's thumb brushed along the back of her hand, slow and reassuring. Then let me stay close. Aaron didn't move away. She leaned her forehead against his neck with a quiet, steadying breath. Her warmth pressed through the thin hospital fabric into his skin. Felix closed his eyes for a second, grounding himself in the feel of her. She wasn't fragile now. She was choosing him. Shiva climbed onto Felix's other side without asking, tucking herself between them. He shifted to make space, wrapping an arm gently around both. In that small, cramped medical room, the shape of their future began to form. Quiet, steady, real. And Felix held them as if they were already his. The transfer to the main clinic happened just before the afternoon cycle. Orderlies arrived with a clean hover gurney and a sealed packet of clothes for Aaron. The new unit was brighter, quieter, built of reinforced glass panels and soft white lights. The air smelled clean, sterile, filtered, nothing like the damp walls of the old wing. Aaron sat up slowly while Felix helped her swing her legs over the side of the bed. Her dress hung loosely on her frame, the fabric still creased from too many washings, but she held herself with more strength today. The 4 had been removed an hour earlier. Her skin carried more color. Her breath was steadier. Shiva held a folded bundle of the clothes the clinic had provided. Mama, they're soft, she said, pressing her cheek to the blue-gray fabric as though testing it for warmth. Aaron touched her daughter's hair. We will wear it later, she said. For now we move. Felix stayed close as they guided Aaron onto the hover gurney, keeping one hand near her back in case she lost balance. When the orderly began pushing the gurney, Shiva seized Felix's sleeve and stayed beside him, matching her steps with the gurney's pace. The hallways widened as they ascended through the tiers. More workers watched them pass, some curious, some disapproving, some pretending not to see. But Felix didn't look away or slow down. Aaron kept her head lifted, aware of the glances, but not shrinking from them. When they reached the main clinic, a nurse directed them into a small private room with a window overlooking the ocean struts. The waves below were restless, slamming against the steel supports in slow, powerful rhythms. Aaron's gaze followed the motion. I did not know the water was this close. You'll hear it every day from here, Felix said. She seemed to consider that. Then she lay back, exhaling slowly as the nurse checked the Regan seals on her arm. Shiva climbed onto the chair near the bed, but didn't sit. She stood on her knees to stay eye level with her mother. Her hands stayed folded tightly in front of her, a habit she used when emotions pressed too strongly. Felix set his bag down in the corner. "I'm staying," he said. "They know." Aaron's eyes traced his face. "You should work." "I have leave," he said. Crane approved it. Aaron almost laughed at that, a quiet breath of disbelief. He fears problems more than he dislikes us. Felix pulled the chair close to her bed. "I'm fine with that." Shiva settled finally, curling her legs under herself. "Mama is safe now," she whispered, almost to reassure herself. Aaron reached past the blanket and touched her daughter's cheek gently. "Yes, little one, safe." By evening, Aaron had changed into the clinic clothes. The fabric was simple and loose, falling just above her knees, leaving her legs bare. The neckline dipped slightly, but without discomfort, and she kept adjusting the strap on her shoulder until it sat the way she liked. Her hair, freshly washed, fell down her back in a soft, straight line. Felix leaned against the window frame, watching her as she checked the seals on the bedside panel. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Lighter," she said. "My body does not fight me every time I breathe." Felix nodded, relief settling in his chest. "Good." Shiva climbed onto Felix's lap without waiting for permission. She curled against him, quiet but comfortable. She had stopped looking at him with worry hours ago. Now, she looked at him the way children look at a wall they consider part of their home. Aaron watched them together, something steady forming in her expression. "Felix," she said softly. He looked toward her. "Yes, you have carried more than you should for us." He shifted. "I didn't do anything I regret." "I know," she said. Her fingers traced the fabric on her knee. "But I should say it. You gave us a place to stand. You fought for care I did not believe I deserved." Felix didn't look away. "You deserved it the day you arrived on this colony." Aaron held his gaze, then looked down at her hands. "There is something else." Shiva looked up at her mother, sensing the change. Aaron took a long breath, steadying herself. "I want to leave Tier 5 when I am discharged. I want a new place to live. A place without leaking ceilings." She lifted her eyes to Felix again. "May we stay with you?" Shiva turned to Felix instantly. "Can we?" Felix straightened in the chair. He hadn't expected her to ask. He had assumed she would need more time, more assurance, more space. Hearing her say it so directly tightened something in his chest. "Yes," he said. "Both of you." Aaron's shoulders eased, the tension she'd been holding for days finally loosening. "Then we decide it now." Shiva's arms wrapped around Felix, small and warm. He held her carefully, feeling Aaron's eyes on him. The next day, Aaron was cleared for discharge. The escort arrived with a small case of her belongings. She gathered them with calm hands, her old dress folded on top, her frayed shawl, Shiva's stitched cloth doll. Felix held the door open as she stepped into the hall, walking on her own for the first time since her treatment started. "You're steadier than yesterday," he noted, walking beside her. "I'm alive," she said simply, "and I want to walk." They reached Felix's residential block in Tier 2 by late afternoon. The corridor was quiet. Only a few workers passed by, glancing at them with mixed curiosity. The air was warmer here, the lights brighter. Felix unlocked his door and stepped aside. "Go in." Aaron paused at the threshold. She looked inside, the clean floor panels, the compact kitchenette, the narrow couch, the window facing the distant ocean. It was nothing luxurious, nothing large, but it was safe, dry, warm, a place to start again. Shiva ran straight to the window. "You can see everything." Aaron stepped inside slowly, taking her time. She touched the hallway wall, then the table, grounding herself. "It is clean," she said, "and it smells calm." Felix closed the door behind them. "It's yours now." Aaron turned to him. Her hair shifted over her shoulders when she did. She stepped closer, stopping in front of him, close enough he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "Felix," she said, "come here." He stepped forward. Aaron lifted a hand and laid it against his chest, fingers spreading slightly against his shirt. "Yesterday you held me, so I could sleep. Today I stand on my own, and there is something I want to say with clear breath." He waited steady. I choose you, she said. Not because you saved me. Because when everyone looked away, you stayed. Because you see me without lowering your eyes. Because you make this place feel less cold. Felix's breath deepened. Aaron placed her other hand over his heart. Do you choose us too? He lifted his hands to her waist, pulling her closer until her hips brushed his. Her head tilted up instinctively, her breath warming the space between them. I choose you, he said, and her, and whatever comes next. Aaron's lips parted, not in surprise, but in acceptance. She leaned in and kissed him. This time, there was no hesitation, no fragile uncertainty. Her fingers slid up his chest and into his hair, drawing him lower. He wrapped his arms fully around her, holding her with the strength he'd withheld in the medical room. Their bodies fit naturally, her softness settling against him, his warmth steadying her. Her breath deepened. His hands tightened at her waist. The kiss grew warmer, slower, deliberate. Two people finally standing on the same ground. Shiva's small voice broke through softly. Mama? Felix. Aaron pulled back just enough to rest her forehead against Felix's, her breath unsteady. She smiled, a real one, deeper than any she had allowed before. We're here, she said. Felix pressed a final kiss to her forehead. We're home. Shiva ran to them, wrapping her arms around both despite not understanding the moment fully, only that something safe had formed between the three of them. Felix lifted her with one arm and pulled Aaron close with the other. The ocean wind rattled softly against the window. Their new life began in that small room, warm, steady, chosen. And for the first time since arriving on Marrow 7, Aaron felt the future reach toward her instead of pulling away.